Hello all and welcome to episode 64 of the 3 for 1 Sky Fantasy podcast by Fantasy Football Hub. As the international break draws slowly to a close and we go headlong into 6 weeks of constant Premier League action. It's going to be absolute chaos. I did a quick look earlier, Paul, and I think in the first 19 days of December there's only 6 days without a match, so it's going to be mad. It's going to be absolutely crazy. My name is Fergi, and I'm joined tonight by one of the most successful Sky managers in the game, still high flying, Paul McAnulty. Paul, how has your international break been?
Hi Fergie, yeah, it's been good. Watched Scotland beat the mighty Moldova on Friday night to
What a win!
Claim our playoff place. So off to the Denmark game tonight. So I enjoy international breaks probably more than most fantasy managers.
Yeah, I've had a break. It's been lovely. I've had a week of rest and relaxation because I know what the next 6 weeks hold. Obviously, both in terms of just fantasy generally, but the hub and all the content and everything. So I've had a really nice week off. I think which helps at times as well because you don't tend to overthink and overplan things, do you? So going fresh into the week now and looking forward to the next week or so. So for any new watchers and listeners, you are very, very welcome. If you haven't subscribed to us yet, please press the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Set the alerts so you don't miss our podcasts. Also, please press the like button if you enjoy our content. It would be much, much appreciated. So tonight we have a jammed show. We are going to have a look at AFCON and how it may affect our plans moving forward. After researching this a little bit, I think my plan has actually changed on one or two players. So it'll be interesting to go through that. So what it means for our Sky teams over Christmas, New Year, and January. We'll also have a look at some Crystal Palace assets potentially going under the radar. So Paul has got a bit of insight there. We'll look at average transfers remaining, which shot up this week. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, Paul, because the top 10 doubled, I think, and we'll look at that in a bit more depth. We'll look ahead specifically to Sky Gameweek 15, answer some Twitter questions, which you had loads again. Thank you so much, everybody. And finish off as usual with some mini league updates. Spoiler alert: I've closed in slightly on Paul because you did have a massive lead, Paul, and now it is closing right in. So we will touch.
That's part of your don't get livery-mental argument to me.
It was, yeah. We had Paul and I had a WhatsApp conversation last week where we decided that Paul wouldn't get livery-mental. It obviously, with the pros and cons for both. But I had him already in my teams. That worked out well for me then, Paul. And I think you were banking on a Spilicueta potentially starting the following day, which he didn't again. It's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got a new plan now. So
got a new plan. Excellent. I look forward to ruining that one for you as well. So now on screen, we've got the top 1K ownership with Salah obviously right at the top. So we've highlighted the 4 players in this list of the top 20 who will be leaving for the African Cup of Nations. Mohamed Salah is obviously 99.9% own the top 1K. Edward Mendy, who is in my team as well, 7.6 million, 60% owned, will be going off with Senegal. Aubameyang and Benrahma, the other two, maybe not, quite as owned. And Benrahma is definitely on a decline after a blistering start to the season. But I suppose, firstly, Paul, very, very high level initial thoughts, in terms of any research you've done. How is the AFCON going to affect our plans over Christmas and New Year?
Yeah, well, the top if you look at the top 10% owned players that could potentially be going to AFCON, that's 207% overall effective ownership. So on average, if Sky managers were going to lose those players, it would take them 2 transfers to get those players out. And if, say, Egypt got knocked out early and you wanted Salah back before a potential overhaul, you're obviously having to compensate with another transfer to get them back in as well. Mendy's one that I'm still sitting with Jose Sa, and I had earmarked the move to Mendy in a couple of weeks' time, and now I'm thinking that Ramsdale might be my move.
I'm thinking instead, the same,
yeah. To cover off that Arsenal captaincy coming up as well. So I don't think Sky fantasy managers are going to use this information to offload those players just now anyway. There's plenty of time, obviously, until the end of December or start of January when those players go. But I think it might put off players bringing them in now, as it is doing with me with Mendy.
Yeah, and there are others as well. It's worth mentioning. I think there's about 39 or 40 players in total. I'll call out a few of the ones who may potentially be interested in fancy options. Thomas Partey will be going off to Ghana. Pepe will be off to Ivory Coast for Arsenal. For Brighton, Bissouma will be off with Mali. For Burnley, Maxwell Cornet. We've mentioned a couple of times, will be off with the Ivory Coast. For Chelsea, we've already mentioned Mendy, and Ziyech will be going off with Morocco. Crystal Palace, Zaha may or may not, because I think he's had a bit of a falling out with the coach. We'll have to see about him. Jeffrey Schlupp, Koyate, and Jordan Ayew as well. For Leicester, Wilfred and Didi will be a miss for them. Iheanacho will be off with Nigeria as well. Liverpool, obviously, we've already mentioned Salah's massive. Also, Mane will be gone as well. And it's interesting because I think the natural thought is to say, oh, well, that's easy. We could maybe jump on Jota or someone else. But the Liverpool attack without Salah and Mane, if we think it's going to be Jota, Firmino, and Origi, is a very different proposition, isn't it? In that period,
they play Chelsea. I think their fixtures aren't particularly great over that period of time either.
Yeah, they've got Leicester on the 28th away, which you can argue at the moment is a good fixture. But obviously, a month on the line, it may be a tougher one. But Chelsea as well, you're right there. And Keita will be off as well. Mahrez for Man City. Just having a look. Southampton. Salisu, who's had a good season so far, will be off with Ghana. And then Watford, who are the most hit actually. Troost Ekong, we've mentioned a couple of times, will be off to Nigeria. Ismaila Sarr will be off with Senegal. Dennis.
5.1% on Sarr as well.
Cool. And Dennis will be off with Nigeria as well. And then West Ham, we've already mentioned Benrahma off to Algeria. A couple of Wolves players, but none really, in terms of fancy assets. So, it does have quite far-reaching impacts. And just a bit on what we know so far about the African Cup of Nations. So it's going to be held in Cameroon. The tournament starts on 9th of January, and the final, I think, is on the 6th of February. But players, as it stands, are expected to leave around Boxing Day or the day after. So there's games on Boxing Day 26th. There's one game on the 27th, which is Newcastle and Man United, which I don't think will affect anything from Sky View. But obviously there are games on the 28th, including Liverpool games. So it's very hard to make a plan at the moment without, knowing exactly when the players will leave. But I think it's really important for us to understand the situation in terms of bringing in players.
On average, more than 1 in 10 Sky Fantasy managers in the top 1,000 alone Benrahma, Mendy, and Salah as well. So that's 3 transfers if you intend on getting rid of them all for that period of time.
My initial thoughts on Salah. So I've had a bit of a look, and we're just flicking to some of the fixtures on the screen. So we mentioned the fixtures there. So Liverpool play on Boxing Day. I think I want to say they're home to Leeds. I haven't got it on screen. But on Monday the 27th, Newcastle have got Man United. So I'm not going for this 3 up front because it doesn't really fit in with my structure. I would have to take up someone like Diaz, someone like that. So it doesn't really work for me. So I'm quite happy throughout December, likely holding just Salah and Kane. I know that Ronaldo does have a couple of really good games, but I think there's arguments for captaincy options against all those on those days anyway. So just looking at it, I think my current plan, potentially, if Salah goes after the game on Boxing Day, is to go Salah to Ronaldo for the captaincy, or Bruno potentially. Obviously, we'll decide at the time. Liverpool do then play on Tuesday the 28th, which is away to Leicester. I think it's probably fair to say he's probably the best captaincy option on that day, even though Kane does have Southampton as well. And then on the Wednesday, there's games on the Wednesday. Chelsea play on the Wednesday, as do Man City. And then Thursday the 30th, Man United play again against Burnley, and they would probably be the best captaincy option then again. So this is why I say I'm looking to that Ronaldo switch kind of roundabout then. And then just following on from that, on Saturday the 1st, Liverpool don't play on that first either. They play away to Chelsea, as you mentioned, on Sunday the 2nd. Well, I don't, in terms of captaincies on those days, it's probably not a lot of exciting ones. But then Monday the 3rd, which is the final day, I believe, that they can look to release the players. Man United play Wolves again. So in that period, you get, 3 Ronaldo games, including 2 captaincies, or even potentially 3, against Salah, who would be away to Leicester and away to Chelsea. So I suppose, Paul, and we don't know yet, obviously, but that's the way I'm looking at it. Do you think there's, in terms of your plan of holding all 3, are you still happy you kind of made that choice, kind of structure wise?
So, well, to your point, you're not set up for it structure wise, and this is why you're looking at this alternative route. But I can get to what I think is an optimal team from where I am just now, with only 2 or 3 transfers.
Yeah.
And that covers all captaincy days as well. So I'm thinking that I'll still go with the 3 up front. And then come when Salah leaves, I could move Salah to Bruno potentially and have Bruno and Ronaldo double up, or I could move back down to Diaz, or I guess there's other options. When you've got 3 up front, you're more flexible in terms of if you're removing a striker to either a defender or a midfielder slot as well. So I was thinking just playing it by ear, go with my current plan, and then make my mind up at nearer the time.
Yeah, it is tough to make any solid plans now, but I think I think there's been a big debate over the last fortnight or so, haven't there, around if you're going with the 2 or going with the 3. But I suppose you're highlighting a plan which works for which works nicely for the 3. I think I'm highlighting a plan which works pretty nicely, I think, for the 2. Obviously, there is a risk of potentially not holding Ronaldo for, I think he plays Norwich and Brentford. Before we start to move into these games, so there's that risk there. But
I've not owned a midfielder higher priced than Rafinha as well, which obviously means that because there's limited money in my midfield, that it's easy. Like, I've got money in the bank to make the moves, and I also don't own Diaz as well. Whereas a lot of people will be using Diaz as they make way, I think, to get the 3 premiums up front, if that's the way they're going.
Yeah, I was thinking of that. Like, I think I mentioned it last week or the week before, but since then Diaz just smashed in a really easy 10 points against Man United, which I know he won't get. The City's fixtures are very good as well, and I don't know. I suppose an argument. If you look at Diaz and Ronaldo, this is the way up, right? This is the one you go for. Obviously, you get a couple of captaincies out of Ronaldo, but I do think on all those days there are alternative captaincies as well. Diaz or Ronaldo, I suppose, just choose your poison. And do you think that Ronaldo in December will outscore Diaz? I know you kind of set your team up in that way, but do you think that will actually play out? Or
I think so. When you factor in, it's easy saying factor in the captaincy days for Man United and knowing that you might not captain Diaz on the City captaincy days. But if you look at the alternatives on the Man United captaincy days, I still think that Ronaldo's probably the best captain on each of those occasions, or at least for the majority of those occasions.
And of course, there is this hop on and hop off thing, right? Where it's, I know all the pods have mentioned where you can cover most of them as well.
I'm just trying to conserve transfers, knowing that I want to use them in January probably.
Yeah, for sure, and February after, actually, because in January it's normally a busy month, but there's only, so there are Premier League matches on the 1st and 2nd of January. There's then FA Cup games the weekend after, and there's only another 2 games after that before we hit the whole overhaul as well. So I think normally where we'd say maybe New Year, save your transfers for New Year. I think there is a case to be said for maybe thinking a bit longer, because all those players like Salah won't be back pre-overhaul. We're obviously assuming here that the overhaul will be on the international break, and the FA Cup. Sorry, go mate. Sorry.
As I say, on the AFCON point, so what I meant by saving the transfers till January was around the AFCON point, and Egypt's favourites for it, so you expect them to go far. And Senegal, for those, because I could understand warranting holding a player still over, if they're going to miss 2 games, but Senegal, who Mendy plays for, is 3rd favourite as well, so you expect them to go far as well.
It's all very interesting, and all this is obviously dependent on injuries as well, right? Because all these players now are going to play a lot of games in the next few weeks. I think there's 10 Premier League sets of fixtures in the next 6 weeks, which going to be absolutely mad, and there will be some high-profile misses as well. I think in terms of players missing the odd game and things as well, which will make it interesting.
For those managers that pick up injuries to their players, I'd always recommend thinking of what the long-term plan is. Like, don't forget what moves that you've got earmarked down the line, and making sure that just because you've got the budget at that moment in time to potentially upgrade a Benrahma to a Tielemans or something like that, then just make sure that you've got the budget to do your planned moves further down the line.
Just on Tielemans, while you're there, so I've been scouring. I can't find any any kind of recent injury update, but there was a concern he would be out for 2 or 3 weeks. This was last week. Obviously, there is another week now until the Premier League starts again. Who's going to miss a game or two? Would you hold on to him, or would you be tempted to move him off?
Depends if he's part of your long-term plans. Were you planning on holding him, or was he an exit point to get someone in that you wanted? If the answer to that's no, I would just hold him. First game's against Chelsea anyway, so I know he scored against them in the FA. He scored against an FA Cup final, didn't he? And that he can pick up tackling bonus against anybody. But I would just hold him for a game if he's part of your long-term move, or you don't want to waste a transfer on him.
I can't see why anyone holding Tielemans would actually want to get rid of him, because
I think it would be for budget reasons. If your plan was to go to the 3 premiums up front, an 8.9 million midfielder might be too much money invested in midfield for you to able to make 2 or 3 moves to get towards that. So I could see merit in a move into a Gallagher or an Emil Smith Rowe or something like that. If that was part of your long-term strategy, I could see why you would maybe want to move money out of there.
Okay. And just finally, on the AFCON stuff, though, we just got a quick graphic showing the fixtures that each team will miss if they do have to leave after Boxing Day. And we've already touched on Liverpool; they would miss Leicester away, Chelsea away, then home to Brentford, and Palace. Everton have got the kind of easiest run of games during this period. Watford have got some good games, and Man United, as we know, have got some good games. Hence all the chat around Ronaldo and Bruno, etc. City have got a tough few games, as have Brighton, but obviously these sets of fixtures will reduce if they do leave a bit later. I think in terms of Sky, just in summary, for me, it's probably had, because we got the overhaul, I think that's the important part in all of this, which is different to other games. Things like Telegraph, you're going to have to bring players kind of in and out, whereas with Salah, you take him out, you won't be bringing him in again. You'll be choosing him, in your overhaul. But I think in summary, it's probably not as big as impact in Sky potentially as in other games like FPL and Telegraph and Dream Team, because all those games haven't got this, overhaul or forced wildcard that period of the season. And, as long as you've got a plan for Salah and maybe Mendy, and obviously don't look to bring in players like Sarr or Mahrez or anyone else, it's quite limited impact. Do you agree with that, Paul, or do you think there's a bit more to it?
Yeah, I think if, say, Senegal got put out the AFCON early, like there wouldn't be a rush to get Mendy back in for the 2 games, I think is your point. Whereas I guess if Egypt were put out early and you had Brentford and Crystal Palace up for Liverpool, you would want to get Salah back in for those games. But there's not a massive impact other than I could see people wanting to get rid of players that aren't playing for that period of time and using transfers up.
Yeah, and I suppose we are assuming here that the end of January will be overhaul. Obviously, if we get it confirmed, it's going to be after that. Bear in mind, I don't think there's another international break or break in play then for quite a while after that, so you assume it would be then, but if it is, this will change and we'll obviously update further. But yes, it's probably not, it has affected a couple of decisions potentially. So you mentioned Ramsdale earlier, this Everton Arsenal captaincy game on the 6th. I currently don't have any captaincy for that. I just had a quick look around what Mendy would miss against Ramsdale, and I'm still not massively convinced. I think for you it makes absolute sense, right? Because you're getting rid of Sarr, but for Mendy it would mean missing a minimum of four matches for Chelsea. They're all pretty decent fixtures as well. They include, I think it's Leeds, Everton, Wolves and Villa, for example. I mean, he could get loads of clean sheets. Is it going to be worth it potentially just for, just for a haul? I'm not, I'm not so sure there. Would you have any thoughts? So those who are tempted to move up Mendy to Ramsdale.
I wouldn't move. Yeah, I wouldn't move off Mendy to Ramsdale.
Oh.
Well, I think Emil Smith-Rowe would be the other one. The two Arsenal players. So I guess I've got three options going into that Arsenal-Everton game. And it's don't do anything, don't have a player for the game. Bring in Smith-Rowe, maybe for Rafinha. There's a good Leeds go through a really tough run of fixtures, and bringing in Smith-Rowe might make sense for me to do then, or to move Salah into Ramsdale.
Okay, and then obviously on the 10th then, which is the other single game there, which is Brentford against Watford. A lot of players, I think, including yourself, Paul, went on and Bumble early, and have been unfortunate, I think, because that it was a really good run. I think the only reason I didn't was because it didn't quite fit into structure of my team. Otherwise, I probably would have. But that's the other one.
I got rid of Sarr for him, so it's not that the person that I took out was scoring a lot of points anyway. No. So I'm actually not too displeased with it.
I currently don't have a captain for either of those matches, actually, on the 6th or the 10th, because I think I'm playing the game a little bit more this year of come to it and then maybe make a decision a bit more at the time, because things like the whole of fantasy has changed right over this last couple of years, I think, with COVID and amongst other things, and I think it's very easy to get stuck. I think form is massive as well. I think if you look at Damari Gray, so those who are holding on to Damari Gray for this one, at the moment Everton look absolute crap, right? And Arsenal look really good at the back, whereas a month ago it was the opposite. So it is interesting how things change, and who's to say on this on this sick that it even works out like that. And I think as well, because we also get to see the starting lineups on both days, because I've fallen foul of this before as well, where you plant in and a player you just inexplicably doesn't even start. I think that's why I'm kind of holding on to make decisions on the day of whether, as you say, leave Ramsdale or Smith-Rowe, leave Bomo, Tony, Pinnock, on that other one. I know it kind of maybe rifles through a few more transfers potentially, but yeah, I don't want to be stuck with duds in my team for some random captaincy like 4 or 6 weeks down the line. Yeah, interesting your plan, Salah to Ramsdale. I like that. Okay, let's move on, and we're going to have a look now. So, Paul, you wanted to talk a bit about Palace and their run.
Yeah, I just had a look at the fixtures coming up and seen what I thought was the best kind of underrepresented team probably, and I think it's Crystal Palace. So obviously a lot of, I think it's 83%, was it from the previous slide? On Gallagher, yeah, 83.6%. So a lot of people have been on him. And one of our viewers had mentioned Gehi a couple of weeks back. Yeah. And I think you asked my opinion on him, and although his stats were looking good in terms of passing bonus, I think Crystal Palace's lack of clean sheets weren't so appealing. But now they've kept back-to-back clean sheets against Man City and against Wolves as well. And I think that he is only owned by 7 managers in the top 1,000.
Wow.
So although he's just kept these back-to-back clean sheets, I still don't think it's necessarily too late to move on to him. And I think if Azpilicueta doesn't play against Leicester, that I'm just going to make the straight move to Gehi. I need budget somewhere anyway to make future moves to get Ronaldo and for Aubameyang. So I think that's like the perfect opportunity for me to get someone in who's got great fixtures, who's almost like Lewis Dunk, in that it feels like he's starting on 5 points at the start of the game instead of 2 points recently. 7.2 million. There is alternatives if people were looking at Crystal Palace players, looking for Azpilicueta replacements, and they actually needed to scrape budget a little bit more so that they could get future picks. So Joe Ward seems to be nailed on that Crystal Palace team, 6.6 million. Mitchell, who loves to pick up tackle bonus, he's 7 million as well. So both of those players are cheaper than Gehi, and they just look a lot more solid under Vieira, which I was one of the cynical people at the start of the season, or pessimistic people in Palace, thinking that that they might end up going down, but they look well drilled, very organised as well. So I know there's no Crystal Palace captaincy, and if there was a captaincy requirement, most people would be on Gallagher anyway. But there's definitely opportunity there, I think, for Palace's great run of fixtures. Another couple of players, Guaita and goals, 6.6 million. I just don't like rotating cheap goalkeepers for another cheap goalkeeper, but there is a real sticky patch for Wolves coming up that their fixtures turn quite bad. So people will be looking to move on, so I'm sure there is alternatives, but Guaita could be one. Say 6.6 million, 57 points to date is pretty reasonable. And then Zaha up front, you had mentioned earlier on, he's fallen out with the coaches at Ivory Coast, so there's a good chance that he doesn't go to the AFCON. Those that aren't going to go 3 premiums up front are getting tired of Antonio's blanks and West Ham's poor fixtures. That could be another nice differential opportunity. He's only owned by 3 players in the top 1,000 as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think personally, I think if we didn't have Gallagher, who's such a shoe-in, right? You know, he's the perfect Sky player in every single way you can imagine. I think a double up on Palace for me is, you know, they do have a really good run right the way up until the overhaul. Yeah, and I know what you mean with Gehi maybe. I don't think I'd be overly keen on any of those, purely because it's a double up on Palace. I think if you were looking at one of them in isolation, I think I'd be a little bit more.
Well, for me, it almost is looking at one of them in isolation.
Well, with it being like a 10-man game.
Gallagher is almost like, well, it's almost a 9-man game just now if you take Gallagher and you take Salah out. So,
no, it's a good point, actually. I didn't really think of it like that. But yeah, I think it's more. I was talking to a couple of people last week because I had a dilemma in FPL around going with Sanchez or Guaita, you know, as a, you know, as my keeper moving forward. I was speaking to Luke, actually, Luke Williams, and he made a really good point for going Brighton over Palace in terms that Brighton have proven that they can keep clean sheets and still perform.
Yeah, I already do on Dunk as well, though. So
no, of course. Sorry, yeah, no, it's more the I was against Palace, but it was, you know, Brighton have proved they can perform with lots of injuries, whereas this Palace team at the moment, we're probably seeing the best of them from a defensive view. Obviously, you know, I know Eze has been out and Olasey has been kind of in and out of the team, and they still are probably working towards their best team, but potentially one defensive injury for Palace. They're not renowned for being a very, very sound defensive unit, are they? So potentially one injury to one, you know, maybe Anderson or you know, or Gay or whoever, and you know, it may be you know, they're a bit fragile underneath, but yeah, you can't argue with Gehi and his you know, his numbers, his stats, his performances, everything about him looks really, really good. Yeah, so you'd have the passing machines at the back there in terms of Dunk, Gehi, Rudiger,
and the thing is with them, they're all like, unless there's injuries, they're all nailed on. So like, I've not got that worry about seeing the Chelsea team sheet every week.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you're right. I've got that with Christensen still. I'm trying to work out a plan at the moment to try and cover a couple of captaincies and then move Christensen in a few weeks back to Antonio. And this, I think this is part of the reason why I'm, you know, it's one of the other reasons why I'm not too sold on the front three, is because I personally think Antonio can potentially match Ronaldo before Ronaldo goes on this crazy run, you know, at the end of January, but at the end of December, but through December, you know, Antonio's fixtures turn, so it's FPL game week 18,
something like the 15th or 14th.
Yeah, they got an incredible run. Home to Norwich, home to Southampton, Watford, Palace, Leeds United, Watford. You know, up until the overhaul. Well, you know, a lot of people taking them out. I'm taking them out this weekend. I think we'll touch on in a minute. Purely to get in Kane, I think, though I'm still not 100% on that. But I think Antonio, a lot of people are wanting back at that point. I suppose that's another argument.
I could move Salah onto Antonio if I needed. I think on the I think you missed that Norwich. Yeah, if you missed the Norwich game, which is obviously like a good captaincy opportunity for Antonio. But after Liverpool play Leeds on Sunday the 26th, I guess I could move him on for the Watford game, and then you get that, like, the tail end of that good run as well.
And Bowen is obviously an alternative. He's been absolutely incredible. Really, really good. I'm looking at him in all formats as well.
I can imagine a lot of people that hold Ben Rama till then might try and just do the straight swap to Bowen.
He looks really good, and as I say, this fixture run they've got, he's basically playing as a striker as well, and he's on corners as well, so he has that, increased potential. But yeah, I'm interested in West Ham. I suppose I don't know. I think I've changed the way I look at playing the game a little bit in the last year or two, in terms of, instead of just concentrating solely on hop on points and hop off points and covering shitty captaincy days, really trying to just keep a kind of a steady, rock solid team that will consistently score points. I found that in various periods of the game, that is where I seem to get my big rises in rank, rather than these odd captaincy days personally. But it's good.
I think if Arsenal were playing in Europe this season, it wouldn't make Smith Rowe as appealing, but it seems like he's now nailed on, and because they're not having to rotate as much because they're not playing the European games, I think it's 7.5. He's not hitting massive tiers, but he is getting into great positions. I think it makes Smith Rowe really appealing as well for that great opportunity to get him in that captaincy day against Everton, because they play it as the last day of the game week as opposed to the first day of the game week as well. So it's one that, as I say, those were the couple of players I was considering for that, him and Ramsdale.
And they run, actually, Arsenal's run over Christmas and over New Year is fantastic as well. So they've got that Everton game the week after, they're home to Southampton, then they're home to West Ham, then they got Leeds, Norwich, and Wolves. So that's their 6 games going over, over Christmas. So you wouldn't be bringing him in just for one game. The only thing on Smith Rowe is, I suppose, he doesn't get much in terms of bonus, does he? And I think stats wise and observationally, he tends to basically score nearly every shot he takes, almost. Whether that's sustainable or not, I'm not sure. Whether when you're considering looking at him over someone like, I don't know, a more of a player who gets lots of bonus. I know James was talking kind of last week on the Planet Sky Pod around. I think he wished he'd gone for more bonus magnets in midfield. Even someone like Declan Rice, just as an example, he's so cheap. Højbjerg, yeah, who just hoover up 4 or 5 points every game week, as opposed to Smith Rowe, who'll be 2, 7, 2, 2, 7. It's always a debate in Sky, isn't it? Which way are you kind of in terms of that Smith Rowe? It sounds like it sounds like you and Ramsdale.
It's all like I've got so I'm not fixed necessarily to any plan at present. My initial moves were, I was going to bring back in Webster, have a double up on Brighton defence. We discussed this when I was talking about Livramento, because it was, for me, in my head, it was, I'll get Livramento and then knowing that I'm going to make a move further down the line and I would need budget for it, or do I potentially get Webster in, and thinking that Webster might have come back last game week against Newcastle and didn't. So now it's kind of, we're not going to see a Brighton team sheet for a while. So unless he comes back in the first game, Webster's almost in the back burner for me. So I was going to do Azpilicueta and Sa to Webster and Mendy, and that was going to be my 2 moves. But now I'm just looking at potential alternatives and backup plans. So if Azpilicueta starts against Leicester, I'm just not going to make any move next weekend. But if he doesn't, then I think I'm going to move to Gehi for that move, and that frees up money so I can do the potential goalkeeper move to Mendy still if I want, or I can bring in Ramsdale. I still got Rafinha to Smith Rowe as an option. So I guess I'm leaving myself 2 or 3 half plans and be able to execute any of those as and when new information feeds in, whether that's lineups or injuries, etc.
You should have gone Livramento, really. Sorry, mate. Let's just touch on the average remaining transfers, which, is a strange old week. So the top 5,000 reduced a little bit to 25.4, and the other 3, I believe the other 3 all increased. So the top 1,000 average is now 27, which is bloody high for this time of year. The top 100, 26. And the top 10 rose from 12 to 25.1. So you've had a lot of questions about this week, Paul, around whether this is genuine, whether they've messed up. What do you think?
So I was thinking about this mathematically, right? So see the top 10. Like the way that it's often thought about is that if one team's got 0 transfers, then there's going to be another team in there. Like say the average transfers for the top 10 was 20, right? And then 8 of the teams had 20. And then like this is the way that some messages on Twitter have been going about, is that, well, if there's one team that's got 0, then there's another team in there that's got 40, and that's very, very unlikely. But see if there was one team in there that had 0 and the rest were averaged out and the average was 20, you would only be sitting on 22, 23 transfers each. It's a small difference between what the average is to the other players in there. And I think this is what's happened, particularly in the top 10, is that someone with 0 transfers or very few transfers has dropped out. And therefore it's brought up the averages. Like someone's came in that could have the average amount of transfers. They don't need to be sitting with 40 transfers to infiltrate the top 10 to make this happen. And I think someone, 1 or 2 managers will have dropped out that have got really low transfers. And when you see, because there's not any open teams in the top 10, but there's a few that are active on Twitter that mention how many transfers they've got as well. And they had about the average, like some a few more, some a few less than the average. So I think that makes sense. And then looking at the top 100, now I see a lot of recognisable names, experienced Sky managers or good FPL players that have moved across and start playing Sky now and are playing it with a sensible approach. Again, some of which are active on Twitter. So it doesn't surprise me. I'm in 134th and I'm only 80 points from the top. I think if you had given me what the overall average transfers were at this stage, what my own transfer count is, in my position off the top, that I'd have bitten your hand off, and that's me sitting with not much more than what the average is, if you know what I mean. So that's so it's not surprised, and I think it's right, but I don't think it's anything to worry about. Unless you've smashed a lot, unless you've smashed.
I know, unless you sat on 20 and you're like, oh god.
Yeah.
But no, if you're above the average there, roundabout or above the average, you're in a really good spot.
It's so condensed points wise.
I think as well, if we think about this logically as well, so there will be lots of people who play Sky. Obviously anyone probably watching this is quite, especially at this point of the season, especially, it's probably quite an engaged player still, right? They pace themselves, they play the game well. But there are lots of players who will just use all their transfers as quickly as they can. And if we think now, so we've just finished our 11th game week. What a 9, there's 5 transfers a week, 8 transfers, 8 weeks worth of 5 is when all the transfers will be gone. There will be a few here who just gone off and scored hundreds or thousands of points, and then the last 3 game weeks they have just sunk back. And to your point, I think that is maybe what has happened, is all those who have used all their transfers, and they just will, because they don't understand how to play the game. They just see themselves as, I'm top of Sky, and what I've won, I'm winning, or whatever else. Whereas actually, okay, you got the monthlies and stuff, or maybe private monthly leagues, but we all know you don't win anything in October or November. Whereas a lot of them still don't. And I speak from experience in terms of talking with friends and things, right? They think that if they're top of a game at any point, that they basically won. And it's like, we're still like less than a third of the way through the season. There's still a lot, only to go. So yeah, I think you're right. I still think I would have expected a bit less transfer use. So just comparing to the Telegraph, just as an example. So the top 10k in the Telegraph, I've only got 25 left. Top 1k in the Telegraph, I've only got 17 left on average. Now this is obviously, and the top 100 have only got 9 left. So the Telegraph have just rifled through theirs. So but it may be a sign of maturity on Sky that a lot of good a lot of players now play the game well, really well, and I think now I've got 32 left. I think after this weekend I'll probably use 1 more.
There's more content out there now as well as our podcast. There's several podcasts, and one of the key takeaways from most podcasts is save some transfers back. So
yeah,
and it's not like the overall number of players playing the game are increasing. It's actually decreased slightly year on year for the last few years. So if, to your point, if there's more engaged players playing now, and it's more concentrated with engaged players that also have access to all content and people that have played the game for quite a while, then it would make sense that it doesn't decrease the average at a certain point in time year on year.
And if you look at the the kind of views and listens that we get, they are in the thousands as well, right? So
Yep.
this just goes up to top 5,000. But yeah, probably the lower you go down, they'll go slower. But it's all interesting stuff. And it's good to get your kind of context on it, Paul, in terms of what you think.
I don't think it's anything to worry about. If you've started reasonably well and you're sitting about average transfers or a little bit more, that's so condensed on points that keep going.
Okay. Let's have a look at next game week then. So this is game week 15. We start off with Leicester and Chelsea at 12:30. Interested to see if Aspie plays, because I'm assuming if he doesn't play, you'll be taking him out, Paul, then. Yep. Villa, Brighton, Burnley, Palace, Newcastle, Brentford, Norwich, Southampton, Watford United, Wolves and West Ham all at 3. And it's great to see all these 3 o'clocks back. And then Liverpool versus Arsenal. So firstly on that day, assuming Salah, Captaincy there, Paul. Anything else in terms of,
right.
of transfers or anything else?
I'll move Aspie to Gehi if there's nothing in the press conference to suggest that Gehi's injured and Aspie doesn't start against Leicester. That would be my single move. And it's not the right time to jump on Arsenal for me. So even if I did want to make the goalkeeper move, it wouldn't be on Saturday. So I guess those that have got Tielemans, and if he's part of your long-term strategy and you find out that he's going to miss that single week, I wouldn't move on. And when I say is he part of your long-term strategy, I mean, have you got a view to move him out, or do you need the budget for something? If the answer to that's no, I would hold him. If you did really want rid of him and you needed to open up money somehow, I guess there's a range of options that we've already spoke about. So you can move to a bonus magnet like Højbjerg if 8.1 million gives you enough of the money that you need. If not, Gallagher if you don't own him, which only 17% of the top 1,000 don't own, or maybe Smith Rowe could be another option there as well.
Declan Rice is one, you just
Declan Rice as well. Yeah,
it's hard to argue. Sorry, he's hard to look past. I know it's a double up for some with Antonio and that sort of thing, but you just keep plugging along, won't he? And West Ham playing so well, he just nails the bonus all the time, doesn't he? Sunday the 21st is the more interesting one, I think. Man City play Everton, which plays a part actually in what may happen if I make a transfer or not. And then Spurs play Leeds, and we've been eyeing up this Spurs v Leeds fixture for a long, long time. Now I think you've got Kane, Paul, in your team, so you're happy to see it finally be here.
Scoring 6 points in 3 games.
Very, very frustrating period for Kane owners so far. So I haven't got Kane, but I have got the money in the bank through other moves I've made previously to do Antonio to Kane, which has been my plan. Now I've been out an hour in over. Oh, sorry, you go on.
I moved Duffy to Kane, which on paper sounds like an amazing upgrade. And in that time, Kane's played 3 games, Duffy's played 2, and Kane's outscored him by 1 point.
Brilliant, absolutely superb. I did see some stats at the start of the season actually as well, that Duffy is outstatting Kane in all attacking statistics as well, which is brilliant. So I planned in Antonio to Kane for this run. Firstly, I think it's probably fair to say that Kane, over the years, has been a better Sky asset than Son. I know that some we tend to with Son, but when Kane is playing well, he tends to get man of the match a lot as well for things like, he'll go back off a corner only and head a corner out when they're winning 1-0 and stuff, and that'll seal him man of the match and things. But this Man City Everton thing has given me a bit of a dilemma, because Everton obviously absolute tripe at the moment. City are playing well, and I've got Cancelo and Diaz, and I get to see the lineups. So it's giving me a bit of a dilemma, because I've got 3 options now. I think I can either not bring in Kane and just leave that extra week for that extra bit of information. I've no doubt I'll want in Kane further down the line, and just leave Antonio in and see what happens in terms of, because how many times do we not make a transfer, then our transfers change, our transfer plans change the following week for various reasons. I can either bring him in and not captain him, which I think is my current plan. So I'm thinking of captaining Cancelo if he starts, but bringing in Kane regardless, because Kane is still quite highly owned, I think, in the top 1K, or will be by the time we get to this day, I believe. And the third is
I think a lot of people brought in Kane last week.
Yeah,
on the Sunday
against Everton, wasn't it? And then the third option is to bring him in and captain him, which is probably what some people will do. I suppose I'm interested in your thoughts on this, Paul, in terms of whether you're confident to captain Kane or whether you're more tempted by Cancelo.
On Dan's poll on FF Stuff, I'm going to add the Cancelo and Diaz captaincy ownership together.
Yeah.
And then if that's more than Kane, I'll captain Cancelo. And if it's less, I'll captain Kane.
Really? So you would captain?
I just like taking the decision out of my hands with captaincies. I'm never been particularly great at it from an FPL perspective, and not so much Sky either. But if you're picking the most owned player in captaincy, it's total risk minimization.
I think it is, and I tend to do the same, right? But Kane and Spurs have looked bloody awful. It's all right to say he scored a hat-trick against. Did he score a hat-trick against in the week? Albania, was it? Or whatever, But City have looked good. Cancelo has looked fantastic. You have to think that Cancelo is probably on for a minimum of a 10-pointer in this game against Everton. Obviously, Everton may score a goal, in which case he's on for a minimum of a 5-pointer. But that's without any attacking returns. Bear in mind he's been incredibly attacking. It means Kane would have to get a goal and shot bonus to get anywhere near him. And the way he's been playing, he doesn't look. I don't understand. I suppose
there's a thing about Leeds and giving up chances. Someone might prove me wrong on this, but I'm going by reading text as opposed to reading stats on this. About Leeds giving up so much more big chances away from home than at home.
Away from home, you're right. But I also know over the last 4 games in total, they've got the best XGC in the league as well, which is a bit of an interesting one. But yeah, I suppose it's just a dilemma I've got at the moment. I think the moment I'm leaning towards bringing Kane in, but captaining Cancelo, I think is what I'm leaning towards at the moment. Because even if Kane does bang, then I'll still cover the majority of at least half the points, I think.
I know that you were talking there about not worrying about fixture gains all the time and all the moves that you make. But if you were to try and make the Antonio to Kane move the following week, they both play on the Sunday. So
yeah, that's a good point.
You wouldn't get a fixture gain from there.
This is why I think I'm bringing him in on this one and why I've waited. Because obviously this weekend West Ham plays, so I get any Antonio points against Wolves then onto Kane. Yeah, I was having a look last night. I think it's the right time to bring him in. I think I'm definitely bringing him in regardless. But it's the captaincy thing for me. It's going to be interesting because either one could go really big and either one could potentially blank as well. So it could be a big swinger. I may do one in either team potentially. But yeah, good stuff there. It's very interesting one, as I say, because it's definitely it's form versus fixtures. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got some questions. Let's run through a few questions. We probably answered quite a few, I would guess. David Martinez, can transfers still be worth it if you're not gaining extra fixtures? For the next few weeks, all the changes I want to make have no obvious jump on points to gain additional appearances. Son to Antonio in Gameweek 18 is one of them, for example. Really good question. What's you think about this, Paul?
I think if you're not if you know that you're making that move for the long term and you're not going to be disappointed if the person that you're taking out, like overly disappointed if the person you take out scores more than the person you brought in. Like I mentioned that Duffy situation there, right? By the time Sunday comes round after that move, like Duffy could have outscored Kane in that point in time. But for me, it was definitely the right move, and I would make that move over again. That was for a fixture gain, but if it wasn't, I mean, Duffy to Kane, so it does sound like one of the best upgrades that you could make in fantasy football, right? Brilliant. So yeah, I worry less about the hop off and hop on spots. If I want a player, I would just go and make the move and accept if the person I took out scored more. Like you're always going to get that, like Palace away to Man City. Like if you brought in a City attacker or a City defender that day, and you took out a Palace defender because that was the move that you wanted to make for the long run, and they outscored them, I think you just have to sit and accept that, right?
Same, yeah. And I think I think there is a bit of an obsession with one covering every single captaincy, and two, these hop on hop off points, because there are just players that if you just want them in your team, I think you just have to do them at times. I did it with Cancelo a couple of weeks ago, just because I looked at the upcoming, fixtures, and I was just like, I can't be without him, and I'm so glad I did, because I would have missed out against his massive haul against United, wasn't it? He had his massive haul against. If I'd have probably played it to get on at the ideal up on point, so yeah, I think it can be overrated.
There's a balance of there's a balance of both, but I definitely wouldn't rule out doing one, like moving on the same day if that was the best time for you to do it, because there was no other obvious.
Yeah, I think just an example of Son to Antonio in game week 18. I just if you really, you must really want Antonio for him to be, for you to even ask this question. I think I would just have a look at the spot where you think you really want Antonio, and okay, if he plays the same day as Son, then just which one you want to do more. I don't think you have to. Especially, the thing is, it's hard with Spurs, because they have always, Spurs and West Ham, because they have always played on a on a Sunday up until now, haven't they? Because they play the Thursdays. Obviously, that will change in the middle of December, but I just think you have to do it sometimes. I think it probably depends how much you want a person. So I definitely wouldn't just keep holding on, because you're missing out on points you should have in the bank. Martin says, to Kane or not to Kane? So both asking the question. Paul's got him already. I'm planning on getting him in. I was a little unsure. I've got to be honest, but you probably could ask for a better set of fixtures. I don't think. I think it's different in other games, different in FPL, because you may not, you can captain Salah over the whole game week. Different in Telegraph because there's no captaincy, but in this game, captaincy on these days is king, and his ownership is going to fly through the roof. You probably got the budget or spot for him somewhere with Diaz or Ronaldo or someone along those lines. I don't think you need him against Leeds if you're going to captain a Man City player. So maybe the week after. But it all depends on your team and your setup. But as Paul said, because I'm taking out Antonio, I don't want to have to take out Antonio for Kane on the same day, so it falls nicely for me this week. Anything to add on Kane, Paul? It's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't, in that position, I'd always get him. I think I don't mind what you've suggested in terms of getting him and captain and Cancelo.
Okay. FF Louis, if you could both overhaul now, what would your team look like going forward? Obviously, we can't go down to the nth degree, but
I can.
Oh, you planned it.
I saw the question. I saw the question. So obviously with no transfers used, I'd still pick Mendy over Ramsdale. I think Mendy, Rudiger, Cancelo, Gehi, Dunk in midfield, Gallagher, Smith Rowe, Rice, and then the three premiums up front, and that way you don't need to make a transfer. I would be missing
Brentford and Watford.
I'd be missing Brentford and Watford, and I'd have captaincy for every other game day with that team.
Yeah, I personally think, and this is the difference within our teams, is I personally think I would have probably Diaz,
Tielemans,
and Cancelo, and which is what I've got, I kind of got anyway. So I think that's the only difference I would have. I think I would rather have a consistent scoring midfielder and maybe a premium defender over Ronaldo. But say it's they'll probably all end up scoring like for like anyway. But yeah, it's interesting because your team is kind of set up that way almost, isn't it? And mine is practically set up the other way almost. So good. And thanks for prepping for that one, Paul, because I would have just said all the obvious ones. Mikey, you asks about Tielemans. I think we touched on this already. As I say, I own Tielemans. I'm very surprised that everyone's so keen to get rid of him because he's been fantastic this season, and their fixtures over the next few. So they've just played through a lot of their hard fixtures. They are home to Chelsea straight after the break. Even if he misses that one, the week after they're home to Watford. They then got Southampton, Villa, Newcastle, Spurs and Everton, over the Christmas break. So I don't know. I just think he looks incredible value. He is a touch on the I wouldn't say expensive side. I'd probably say premium side in terms of the mids, but I think he justifies it with what he gets. He was unlucky in the game he got injured in the one before. He was unlucky actually to not get not get a couple of assists as well. So yeah,
he sits a 2 premium up front formation for sure.
I think if I was to move him on, I would probably look to go to the cheapest, best budget option, which I think is Rice. Or there's obviously, you can move on to Smith Rowe early potentially, or Mbomo maybe, or some of the other captaincies. But yeah, I think you save 1.3 million go into Rice, which obviously, yeah, you do 8.7 to 7.4.
8.7. I thought it was 8.9.
No,
yeah.
No, you say 8.7, 7.4. Which
1.2 and 1.2 to Smith Rowe as well. So
yeah, exactly. So hopefully that has helped you there, Mikey. Dan, has anything changed? You have to see in the latest average transfers remaining. Could it be wise to be even more conservative, or do you still intend to stick with your existing plan and methods? I think probably answered that. I think you answered it very well, Paul, in terms of don't worry, just kind of keep calm and carry on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Obviously, for those who are maybe less than the average, it's probably worth just having a look at, and kind of arresting yourself a little bit in terms of thinking, if you are around 23, 24 or 25, it's worth keeping an eye on these. Todd Sims, what are your guys' plans regarding Kane, Salah, Ronaldo? Are you going to have all three make sacrifices or potentially save transfers and rotate? PS, love the content, guys. So yeah, I think Paul and I, by the sound of it, are going very different in December. Actually, Paul is going for all three. I think I'm going for two. I'm still personally not convinced that having Ronaldo will be better than holding on to players like Diaz and Tielemans, for example. Although Paul will very we've got all captaincies in place and I haven't, so I'd have to use more transfers then. So I don't think there's a right answer, is there, really, with this? But
how your team set up at the moment probably gears you towards making a decision on which way to go as well, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be an interesting experiment to see where we both are, kind of, rank-wise and transfer-wise in January and, at the overhaul. Because obviously the decisions we make now, as you say, structurally, are going to massively influence. Bear in mind, we've just played 11 game weeks worth of matches. We'll now be playing another 12 before the overhaul. So it's double the amount of time, which is crazy when you think about it, innit? But it's going to have a massive, massive impact. Sure. Dale asks, do we hop off Chelsea defenders to Man City? Already have Cancelo, but would like Diaz. Sick of worrying about Christensen every week. Would mean I'd have to downgrade Havertz. Ideally want Foden in, but think Diaz is the better pick. So you haven't got Diaz, Paul, but at the moment you're not concerned because you're pro Ronaldo.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm not concerned. Like Diaz is going to be one of the best value players in the game at the end of the season, I'd imagine. But I've kind of made my bed and I'll lie in it now.
I think with Christensen, yeah. So I've got a plan. I think I think being unfortunate and then fortunate, but as with all these things, they all balance out, right? So we had a lovely couple of back-to-back 10-pointers off Christensen. I think we've had 2 in the last 3 weeks. Whereas before that, I don't think he started. I think he missed 2 out of 3 or something. So just balance it out. But I'm like you, Dale, as well. I think the only way I'm going to keep Christensen is if someone like Thiago Silva or Rudiger or someone gets injured. I think for a few weeks. But the way it's worked out with AFCON and all this stuff, unless that happens, and even then they've still got Sarr and Chalobah and whatever else. So I'm currently formulating a plan to be able to move Christensen onto Antonio, which is only 0.5 more in the middle of December. So hopefully in that time I'll have another couple of clean sheets of Christensen in that time. But yeah, I'm with you on that. It is frustrating, especially when you see Chelsea win very easily. Christensen should have a 10-pointer, for example, and doesn't. But look at his points; he's still one of the best scoring players. And as we see with Reece James, if someone is playing incredibly well, Tuchel is not scared to actually just kind of play them out of the game either, which is maybe different from how Lampard and a couple of others were. So I'd leave him a few weeks personally, mate. But you're probably going to have to make a decision between Diaz and Ronaldo. I think I've gone Diaz. Paul's gone Ronaldo. So, but yeah, there's no right or wrong. It's what you want to do. Tom asks about how we're going to cover the Arsenal-Everton game. So Paul is an hour on Ramsdale potentially. I'm just going to see kind of when we get to it, I think, because you get to see the lineups as well. And as we've learned, we can plan all these things weeks in advance, but it doesn't really work out. Just as an example, so I was thinking of hanging on to Damari Gray last week, and not having Livramento on the Friday just for this game. But I thought, I'll make the transfer. I'm already Paul Seeding, already kind of 18 points up on that. So
is that what you got for captaincy? Was it?
Yeah, 18 points for captaincy for that one, mate. Yeah, and right up your backside in the ranks as well, which is quite nice. But more so, I've already kind of made the profit I would have potentially made off Damari Gray on that Everton Arsenal game, I suppose, what I'm trying to say. And I've given myself an option now of getting a captain if I want. It could have gone the other way, obviously. But the way Everton are looking, I just can't get excited. So, I think I'm going to see near the time. It could even be Aubameyang. It could even, Smith Rowe, Ramsdale, someone like Gabriel. I mean, who knows? It depends if they hit the passing. I know that the Arsenal players hit the pass in the last game, didn't they? But we will see. And Paul, you're interested in Ramsdale, which I think is a good option there. Yeah. Kippy asks, when United fixtures change, best to go 3 premiums or rotate? I think we've answered that one, Kippy, to death. Luke NDN asks, plan to transfer Hwang to Højbjerg after Wolves versus Norwich. Then I plan to move Salah to Ronaldo and Kane to Salah. Are these good moves? And the reason he's asking about these moves, he's in 40th position overall. Well done, Luke, with 31 transfers left. So I need to make some gains on the top 10. I don't think you need to, Luke, at all. Like I say, we're less than a third of the way through the season, so I wouldn't worry about making gains in the slightest, personally. But in terms of those moves, Paul, are they kind of sound, do you think?
Solid moves. He's gaining extra games,
Yep.
Sounds like, from the majority of the moves he's making as well.
Cool, excellent. Yeah, but I wouldn't worry about making gains, Luke. This game, for the first 3 quarters of the season is all about just putting yourself in a position to be able to potentially have a go at the end. It's not, you don't win anything in November or December, right? As was kind of mentioned earlier.
Liam Dorian, I think, said that he broke into the top 100 around about Christmas time when the year he won it.
Yeah, definitely. Ian Dunnington, poor start, but now scoring 90 plus each week. When everyone is also scoring the same, it's hard to move up the leaderboard. We need to take a gamble away from the mainstream or stick with it. So exactly what we're saying, no, you don't, Ian, in the slightest. Anything to add there, Paul? Just see the last question, yeah? Like I say, we're less than a third of the way through the season. It's, we'll look back in 4 game weeks, 8 game weeks, 10 game weeks. We'll look at our teams and they'll be unrecognizable. We'll see, what are we worrying about? Wish you'd held transfer. It's always the same. There's always the same regret I find in fantasy is you think, oh my goodness, how are you going to use all these transfers? But by the end of the season, we're always thinking, how have I run out of transfers? It's always that you've never ever get to the end of the season with transfers left thinking, oh my God, I've wasted these transfers, which I think is a bit of a fear, but it never plays out like that, right? Never ever. Dragos asks around the big 3. Don't think there's a right answer there, Dragos. As we've talked about, just a couple more questions. Hacking asks about Kane. Do I stay put for another week? Absolutely, Hacking. You don't want to get rid of him now. That could potentially be suicide there. And last question off all Bruno. If you have to choose between one, right, Havertz to Dunk on Saturday and Antonio to Kane on Sunday, or Havertz and Antonio to Kane and Højbjerg, what would you do? Hopefully that made sense.
I would look at the team sheets and say if Havertz didn't play, I'm guessing that you want Dunk more than they want Højbjerg by the question, I think. And then if Havertz played on the Saturday, I would take that, and you always gain the extra information on another 24 hours, and then you can make those other moves. Or if he didn't play and you really wanted Dunk more, then you can make the Dunk move on the Saturday.
Lovely stuff, Paul. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, let's have a quick look at top of a couple of the mini leagues. So this is the Hub £500 prize mini league. In 10th place, Mark Hawes. 9th, Adam Billany. 8th, Luke Notley. 7th, Billy Fraser. 6th, Rob Watson Lang. And I know that Rob is 26th overall, so 6 of these are in the in the real upper echelons. Ryan West is 5th. LC Bishop 4th. Gareth Solomon 3rd. Liam Stevens 2nd. And John Kerr 1st. So very, very well played to everyone in that league. And the Four Nations League, in 10th place is Paul's second team. They've got Liam's teams in 8th and 9th. Dan's second team is in 7th. Ian's teams are in 5th and 6th. His best team is on 983. Dan's first team is on 995. My teams are in 2nd and 3rd at the moment, so my best team is on 1044, which is ranked around 238th. And Paul is still in front. He's on 1059. His rank is 134th overall, as he's mentioned, only 80 points off the top. But the big news, Paul, is I may need to get the Welsh flag out in a couple of weeks. I think you mentioned the other day that I didn't even have a Welsh flag in the bit on the side because I've never had to use it. But
lazy admin,
agreed. So, but yeah, it's getting quite tight up there. And in all fairness, Paul, I think it's fair to say we're both having reasonably good seasons so far, which is nice. And hopefully, come the new year, there's a chance of us both being in around the top 100, which would be nice. Last year, I never managed to get inside the top 100. I got to I think on one game overnight, I got to 103rd, and I just could not get myself. But I've got a lot more transfers this year than I had last, so I'm reasonably hopeful of both of us being in there. Come maybe the new year, we'll see, or even in the coming weeks, depending on how things play out. Hopefully, that is it from us for this episode. We hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for everyone for sending in your questions as usual. Thank you so much for watching or listening. Your continued support is much, much appreciated. And thank you so much, Paul, as usual, for all your brilliant insight and thought. Where can people find you, Paul?
On Twitter at Paul McAnulty 1, MCANULTY.
Superb. My Twitter handle is at FFH_Fergi. So this podcast and video will be on the Fantasy Football Hub, Sky and TFF YouTube channel. We did also do a Telegraph fantasy podcast last night, 2 hours and 39 minutes. So if you are into your Telegraph, you may want to break that up into 5 parts, but hopefully it's useful for you going forward. And it's also available in all major podcast platforms. If you like what you watch, please click the like button. Remember to subscribe in the bottom right corner of the screen. If you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast, leave some comments. Our handles on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are at FFH_HQ. And our podcast Twitter handle is at FFH_Sky. So please feel free to follow and ask us any questions. Our website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, where you'll find everything you need for fantasy football all under one roof, including player comparison tools, the fixture ticker, Opta stats, top player team reveals, everything you could need to make yourself a better fantasy manager. And we'll be back next week looking ahead to Game Week 16. Stay safe and good night all.